The sly grin of the pale face shone in the moonlight. The man held out his thumb on the side of the road, a thumb that seemed unnaturally long and pointed. His skin looked as white as a sheet of paper, and his grin spread from ear to ear. His eyes watched me passing like two dark oil spots shining under the street lamp. I did not pull over. I didn't even talk to the man. But it would happen again. Everything had gone strange. That day back in 2019 had seemed normal enough. I had gone to work, doing a night shift at the warehouse. They paid me decent, $24 an hour, so commuting 30 minutes each way didn't bother me. I certainly had no higher paying warehouse jobs in my town, a town where huge stretches of forest took over most of the land. At 2:25 a.m. I left work, driving home the same country roads I had used thousands of times before. It was a straight shot to my town, a winding paved road that passed by countless corn and tobacco fields, the smell of manure permeating the air and wafting in through the vents. I had burned the air freshener slightly, as I always did, releasing a nice vanilla smell inside the car that sent the reeking odor of old fertilizer away. But by 2:50 a.m., I realized something seemed off. First, I should have reached houses by now, but the road just kept going forwards, totally dark, the fields stretching off to the horizon in every direction. Eventually, I realized I was going in a circle. I saw the same massive dead tree on the right, its bare branches reaching up into the cloudless sky. I considered turning around and trying to go back the way I came, but I knew I had to be on the right road. So I kept going forwards, and after a few minutes, I saw the hitchhiker for the first time. His skin looked totally white and bloodless, thin and papery as it stretched across his strangely inhuman face. His grin seemed to stretch from ear to ear, and I saw his long, twisted thumb extended when I passed. Like hell I'm picking him up, I said to myself, turning on the radio. But I checked the rearview mirror a few times, my heart seeming to beat too fast in my chest when I did. And I saw him staring in my direction, still smiling broadly. His limbs seemed thin and twisted, too long, the joints bending in ways and areas that a human limb shouldn't normally go. He wore a plain khaki shirt and khaki pants. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was the uniform for jails and prisons in the area, at least for lower security inmates who didn't require the bright red or orange jumpsuits of potential escapees, or those suspected or convicted of extreme crimes. The streetlights flickered as I looked back, strobing quickly, casting the silhouette of the man in an eerie light. With every strobe, I saw his face transforming, the smile fading into a scowl of pure hatred and insanity. I drove faster, trying to get away. 5 minutes later, I saw him again in front of my car. The road went straight, but somehow he had gotten ahead of me again. The lights flickered faster all around the road, and his smile had returned, though looking even more menacing than before. His teeth looked too sharp, and there seemed to be far too many of them in that inhumanly wide mouth. As I drove slowly past him, my heart hammering in my chest, the whole world went dark, and I slammed on my brakes. The lights on my car had just cut out, as well as the streetlights, and the ambient light from the stars and moon was non-existent under the thick black clouds covering the sky to the horizon. I heard light footsteps against the pavement of the road. My engine still ran, but even inside the car, the lights had gone out. The radio turned off, and the gauges stopped working. Something felt wrong inside the car, and not just in the mechanical sense. There was a feeling of dread. As the streetlights and gauges and radio all came back on at the same moment, I saw the man in my passenger seat, that eerie grin still spread across his face. The door had never opened or shut as far as I knew or heard. It seemed like he had just teleported into the car from his position near the passenger door. But perhaps that was simply a trick of my mind and the darkness. Perhaps. "Thank you for helping me," he said in a low, mocking tone. "You don't know how many people just drive past and refuse to help their fellow human beings in a time of trouble." "What do you want?" I asked in a low voice, whispering the words. I wished I had a knife or a can of mace or something that would give me an edge. I felt naked. "I just need a ride to the next exit, my friend," he said. "This isn't a highway," I said. "There are no exits. It's just a random country road, and I'm not even sure I know where I am. I don't know how that's possible, seeing as I take this way home every day, but There are exits when we need them in life, he said, and I need one now. Go forwards, and when you see the exit to Rusty Township, take it. I'll let you go if you do. I'll let you live. But otherwise, he turned to me, grinning again. Looking at his sly, inhuman face, hearing his words, a fragment of an old poem by Robert Browning I first heard in college came to me. My first thought was he lied in every word, that hoary cripple with malicious eye. Askance to watch the working of his lie, on mine and mouth scarce able to afford. Suppression of the glee that pursed and scored, its edge at one more victim gained thereby. What else should he be set for with his staff? What, save to waylay with his lies and snare all travelers who might find him posted there and ask the road? I guessed what skull-like laugh would break, would crutch gin write my epitaph for pastime in the dusty thoroughfare. Looking into those eyes, I felt that this poem had been written about this exact man. I drove forwards and the man reached into his pocket. I tensed, expecting a knife or a gun, but he brought out a little pouch. What's that? I asked nervously, looking over. To my surprise, an exit sign had shown up a few hundred feet ahead. The pale man threw the pouch from hand to hand, his twisted, inhumanly long fingers snatching it out of the air like a toad snatching a fly. Just a few precious things I like to keep on me, he said. Where we are going, we will need these. By the way, what is your name? If we are going to be traveling companions, we should introduce ourselves. That is, after all, the basic custom in all worlds. Up ahead, I could make out the sign now. To Rusty Township, 5 miles. Ah, good old Rusty, the man said. It is a spectacular place. You will never see another one like it, I guarantee you. By the way, my name is Foras. I'm quite a big deal where I come from, you see. You'll be happy you stopped and helped me, I guarantee that. He laughed, a shrill, gurgling sound that made my blood run cold. Isn't that right, Jason? I nodded. I wasn't surprised in the least that he knew my name already. Clearly, he had been waiting for me and me alone. I didn't know why, but I had a feeling I would find out soon. I turned on my blinker as we approached the exit, even though I hadn't seen another car or human being on the road in over an hour and a half. The woods rapidly receded into broken, bombed-out houses and buildings. The darkness around us jumped and danced as the headlights illuminated rusting tanks, with the tops blown off and burnt cars whose blackened skeletons stood on the sides of the roads like sentries, their smashed and shattered safety glass scattered across the road. What is this place? I asked, horrified. Just keep driving, the man said. At certain points, the road narrowed so much from the wreckage that I had to slow down to a few miles an hour, trying to weave in and out of the cataclysmic damage that had destroyed this city. Off in the distance, I saw the silhouettes of skyscrapers, black against a dark gray, cloudy sky. No lights shone in the buildings. Bodies hung from the dead, lightless lampposts as we neared the downtown. Soon, the entire main street turned into a pile of wreckage, and my car could go no further on that road. The remains of what looked like a fighter jet shone under my headlights, pieces scattered and twisted and blackened from flames across every part of the road. The corpse of the plane mixed with the various burnt-out cars and destroyed tanks to create a nearly impenetrable barricade, unless one was on foot and could climb over the wreckage. Foras pointed to a side street, grinning. I swung the car left, and the lights illuminated a horror I had never imagined, the first living being I had seen in this apocalyptic wasteland. I thought I saw a little boy for a moment, but it seemed all wrong. His skin shone a bright red, like the color of inflammation, and he spider-walked all fours backwards, his head upside down, his hands twisted in front of him as his chest bent and heaved. I had never seen anything like it, except maybe in movies like The Exorcist, and the speed with which he went forwards in that twisted posture sent waves of dread running through my body. His eyes focused on the headlights of the car, and he hissed so lewdly that I could hear it through the closed windows of the car. He moved forward, twisting and writhing, his joints seeming to bend in ways that no human limb could, his head so hyperextended that it looked like his neck should have snapped. But it was the eyes reflecting the light of the headlamps, that really disturbed me. They looked to be covered in a bloody film, a thick pink membrane that dribbled strange fluids down his face. Underneath that cataract, I could almost see the vague suggestion of eyes, but it was like staring down a well, unable to make out the bottom except by silhouettes or glimpses. Jumping up on all fours, he flew through the air and landed fast on my windshield. I began to scream. "Forrest, do something!" I yelled, but his bloodless, inhuman face seemed nonplussed. I saw, in the photographic awareness of a massive adrenaline spike, he still had his little pouch in his hand. Sighing, he opened it up, untying the drawstring. I heard little clicking sounds coming from inside. Looking back up, I saw the boy's face almost pressed against the windshield, staring directly at me. The eyes only a foot away through the thin glass regarded me with abject hatred and hunger. He gnashed his teeth, snapping his jaw open and closed. Then I saw his little red hand lift up, and he started smashing at the windshield. With no apparent pain, his fist collided with the glass in front of my face. A circular dent appeared, the loud thud making me jump so high I nearly hit my head on the top of the car. Cracks spiderwebbed out. He raised his hand again, punching hard, furious, spitting and hissing. Coming back down, I heard the windshield give way when he hit the same exact spot again. As if in slow motion, I saw the web of cracks lengthen and thicken when the safety glass shattered, sending the debris flying all over me, Forrest and the inside of the car. Forrest no longer smiled. His scowl made him look totally demented. The pouch had opened, and from it, he drew a pebble, no larger than a pencil eraser. The pebble seemed to radiate colors and light, almost like opal, but the light in the stone seemed to come from within it. The rainbows of colors shimmered within the stone, constantly swirling and combining. The boy began to reach into the car and I started shrieking. His fingers looked broken and twisted, and I saw his nails had turned black, with crusted blood and dirt showed deep underneath them. The smell of his body from so close made me want to gag. The odor felt like it had a physical presence in the car, a thick, rotting, cheesy smell that emanated from the boy's strank flesh. Forrest grabbed the hand just as it neared my throat. The bleached hand of Forrest snatched it in a blur, moving faster than humanly possible, and with a terrible crack, I heard the bone snap as he twisted the hand backwards, until it nearly touched the boy's arm. The bone splintered and snapped through the skin, sending drops of dark crimson blood flying in every direction. After a moment of utter silence, the boy let out a wail that shook the car. I covered my ears as the rest of the glass in my car shattered under the deafening cacophony. "God, shut him up!" I tried to scream to Forrest, but I couldn't even hear my own words. If it went on much longer, I felt certain my eardrums would explode. I clamped down tighter around my ears, but at that moment, Forrest pulled the boy by his broken arm towards him and raised the colorful stone to the boy's face. With his other hand, he grabbed the boy's throat and choked, closing off his windpipe. My ears rang in the sudden silence. My boy," Forrest said in a fatherly tone, smiling. "This is the wrong car for you to attack." He squeezed tighter, and the boy's already crimson face went an even darker hue. He tried to claw and bite at Forrest, but the boy rapidly lost strength. As the boy died, Forrest raised the string, iridescent pebble to the boy's mouth. I saw something go from the boy into the pebble, but I'm not sure what. It looked like streaming shadows, totally black and impenetrable. It ran in a current, the black torrent swirling and twisting as the pebble absorbed all of it. The boy seemed to lose substance, his skin sucking in on his body, his flesh evaporating before my eyes. By the end, he looked like just a desiccated skeleton with dried, papery skin. Forrest threw him forwards easily, the light body arcing through the air and falling on top of a blackened motorcycle laying on its side in the middle of the street. I looked over and saw with both wonder and horror that the pebble had changed. Its formerly opalescent quality had gone, and now torrents of black and dark crimson swarmed in the stone, still twisting and moving constantly, but without the beautiful iridescent light it had earlier shown. "What? What is this place?" I asked, the only thing I could think of. I didn't expect Forrest to answer truthfully. I knew he would probably kill me as soon as we got to wherever we were going. But he surprised me and told me a story that I would later confirm to be true. "I told you this is Rusty Township," he said, "in the country of Victoriate. It is a rather long story, I am sorry to say, and I don't have time to tell you all of it. I can give you, what do you call it in your world? The Cliff Notes version. Okay, I said uncertainly. He looked down at the pebble, still in his hand, and with a dexterous flip of his fingers, threw it in the air and watched it land perfectly in the little open pouch in his other hand. He tied the knot and put it back in his pocket, turning to me and grinning. It is a rather funny story, he said. I mean, at least to me. A few billion dead, and the rest refugees in a dying, unrecognizable world. He laughed at this. I guess it all started with a man called General Matheson. He took power in Victoriat in a coup from the democratically elected government during a period of hyperinflation and crippling unemployment, when the people rioted and the homeless covered every street. The citizens of Victoriat supported him, by and large, because the conditions seemed so terrible that they thought it couldn't possibly get any worse. Ironic in a way, isn't it? So General Matheson started fixing the economy by starting wars. A wartime economy required countless tanks, soldiers, planes, missiles, and everything else, which caused new jobs to appear. He bombed the Kingdom of China, stating that they had taken legitimate islands in the South China Sea from Victoria's ally in the region. Meanwhile, back at home, he also began recruiting men for the running of camps and the rounding up and murder of all undesirables. He began with drug addicts and alcoholics, homeless people, the insane, criminals, and whoever else seemed unfit for his great new country. The men called themselves the Iron Servants. They would drag people off the streets and take them away, never to be seen again. In reality, the Iron Servants would put them in a cell or transport bus and give them all water to drink. Water laced with high doses of carfentanil and atorphine, which are both tasteless and extremely lethal. Afterwards, they'd just burn the bodies in open-air pits. By this method, they killed tens of millions of people, and the economy was absolutely roaring. Everyone was happy, everyone had jobs, and all the problems seemed to have disappeared overnight. A true success, right? A happy ending. Well, not exactly. It turns out the Kingdom of China had developed a strange new bomb. Not a nuclear one, but one that used antimatter as the explosive material. It had a far stronger yield than any hydrogen bomb ever developed, or so they predicted. But antimatter was so expensive and hard to produce that they had no trial runs. They took the first bomb and dropped it over Victoria's center, near the city of Rusty Township, where we are now. The antimatter ignited when it hit the surface and was released from its containment, and there was an explosion, a massive crater that went deep into the ground. A black mushroom cloud went high into the clouds, and the ground shook. But when the smoke had cleared, it seemed the antimatter bomb hadn't had nearly as much yield as projected. Most of the city still stood, but that crater had strange things within it, as the people soon found out. Very strange things indeed. They began to crawl and swarm out of the hole, as if a tunnel to another world had been opened. And perhaps it had. There's no perhaps about it, I thought to myself, as I put the destroyed car in drive and went forwards into a dead city. Desperate, I watched Forrest out of the corner of my eye. He seemed to watch me in return, though his eyes constantly flicked back to the road. I saw the headlights reflecting off strange eyes in the alleyways and buildings, but whenever I turned to look, only the shadows remained. I had my seatbelt on and Forrest didn't. He must have felt confident in his abilities and unconcerned with a car crash. I knew he had power, and I quickly formulated a suicidal plan. I accelerated the car. Ahead of us, I saw a light pole with a long-dead, desiccated corpse hanging from a fraying noose. I tried to line up the passenger side of the car directly with the metal pole. Holding my breath, I closed my eyes as the car closed the last few feet, still accelerating, engine roaring. I couldn't have been going more than 40 miles an hour, but it sent Forrest flying through the shattered windshield. The driver's side airbag deployed, smashing me in the face so hard I saw stars. I felt blood gushing from my nose, and the world seemed to go dark for a few seconds. The engine hissed, spitting coolant and transmission fluid in great steaming gouts that puddled under the car. After regaining my senses, I looked up to see Forrest. He lay on the hood of the car, moaning and moving his hands in random circles. Blood streamed from a deep gash on his skull and covered his inhuman face. He wasn't smiling anymore. Stumbling, my fingers trembling, I undid the seatbelt and opened the driver's door, falling on the cracked pavement below. I breathed hard, then with a sudden burst of will, I pushed myself up. Foraz still grunted incomprehensible sounds, apparently unaware of where he was. I heard him repeating the same nonsense over and over. Ma, he said, clenching and unclenching his twisted fingers. I thought of just choking him then and there, while he was seemingly weak and defenseless. But I didn't know how defenseless he actually was, even in this weakened state. Moreover, I had no idea how to get back to my world, and killing the only being who I felt sure knew the way might backfire spectacularly, dooming me here for the rest of my life. I decided to book it as fast as I could and leave him there, bleeding on the crumpled front of the car. I started walking fast, stumbling slightly as a sharp pain ran up my leg. When I felt I had mostly regained my balance after the crash, I started jogging away. Looking back towards the car, I saw him getting up slowly, trying to push himself off the hood of the car with his long, strange fingers. He fell back down on the hood, then reached down with shaking hands and took something out of one of his bound leather satchels, placing it in his mouth. I took a left into the first alleyway I found. This whole city was a horror show, a deluge of nightmares. Rotting corpses lay everywhere, and I saw a dumpster at the end of the alleyway, filled to the brim with body parts. Decomposing legs, arms, chests, and hands, all sliced off, had been thrown into the dumpster haphazardly, like common refuse. One hand limply reached out as if trying to motion for help. It had blackened fingernails, and the thumb was missing. The body parts overflowed the dumpster, a cloud of bugs buzzing around it. The smell, as I got near, was overwhelming. I gagged, moving to the other side of the alley, trying to put as much distance between myself and that dumpster as humanly possible. It was an odor like rotting tomatoes, mixed with feces and rancid meat. But before I left that city, I would see and smell much more like it. I took random turns left and right through the streets and alleyways, trying to put as much distance as possible between myself and Forrest. Paranoid, I kept hearing imaginary footsteps, but it was always just the echo of my own. In one alleyway, I saw what looked like a mutated raccoon standing at the far end. It was the size of a German shepherd, with huge tumors and fibroid growths all over its body. I saw a fifth paw hanging down underneath its stomach, boneless and stunted. It gnawed on the corpse of an old woman that had long since desiccated, chewing open her bones and trying to suck out the marrow with its twisted, stained teeth. The raccoon didn't notice me, or the strange silhouette slowly sneaking up behind it. As soon as I saw movement, I quickly looked around and saw a stainless steel garbage can with dark, thick fluid that dripped down the exterior. When I hurriedly peered down, part of me expecting to see Forrest's inhuman, grinning face in there, I found something nearly as horrible. I saw the garbage can was filled with rotting dogs and cats, piled one on top of another like cordwood. For a moment, I was so horrified that I almost forgot what I was doing. Then my brain screamed at me to move, to hide, and I lunged to the side, hoping the man on the far end of the alleyway hadn't seen me. I held my breath, trying not to inhale the overwhelmingly rancid stench that radiated from the can. Decomposing animals smell different from rotting human corpses, as anyone with experience in both can attest to. Rotting corpses always had more of a rotten tomato smell, combined with